Without further ado, let's bring up the comments for us to review. These are several comments that were posted on part 3 of my calling out all Trinitarian scholars and apologetic cultists video. And they're posted by someone, at least the initial comment and the replies that responded to me are from someone called Love for Jesus. The person begins by greeting me. Hi, Greg. I used to be a JW, and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I am praying for your salvation. I have a question for you. If Jesus was with Jehovah before the creation of the heavens and the earth, where was Jesus dwelling? Also, if Jehovah is above Jesus, Jehovah would have to occupy space and time, matter. If Jehovah is eternal, then he cannot be above anything, because God does not occupy space and time. Several definitive statements here about what is or isn't true about God that we'll consider further in a moment. But it just so happens that this person is repeating several arguments that others have told me. A spiritually retarded lame who regularly blasphemes God and this channel, and me personally, brought up to try to argue on behalf of the Trinity, or concepts related to it involving time. So here this person has come to my channel and presented this argument for me. My response: Jah is the existing one, Ha'on, according to Revelation 1:4, in contrast to Jesus in the same verse. Hebrews 3:4 says, every house is built by someone, and God built all things. So before God built his house, John 14:2, he merely existed in a way beyond our comprehension as the Ha'on. He first created Jesus, as is clear from numerous texts, comparison of Deuteronomy 21:17 with Colossians 1:15 on firstborn. Jesus is giving life by the Father who already has life in him, John 5:26. Revelation 3:14, which uses arche with the genitive expression that always means the beginning of that which is named in the genitive. And Proverbs 8:22 through 25, which explicitly teaches wisdom, identified in the New Testament as Jesus, was begotten or created, they're used in parallel sequence, before the physical creations, and many others. My comment goes on, and then made everything through him, including his house. If you would just read the Bible and not follow spiritually retarded lames or traditions, you would know this, but I am praying for you. And notice, not one biblical text is cited in this comment. And so I go on and point that out. I notice you do not provide one single reference for your views, totally unlike my response. Therefore, may I ask, where are you getting God does not occupy space or time? If not in the Bible, and you believe the Bible, please stop teaching what you cannot prove from it. Otherwise, you look stupid. Thank you. I then go on and state, now, since Jesus is God's firstborn in a non-figurative context, Hebrews 1:6, Colossians 1:15, and since the Bible explicitly defines non figurative firstborns as the beginning of one's children, Septuagint, Deuteronomy 21:17, or generative power, Hebrew, you must believe Jesus is the beginning of God's children / generative power, right? If not, who is God's real firstborn? Please answer using only the Bible, not traditions and not comments by idiots who reject Jesus as God's real firstborn. Thanks again. Let's take a look at that again before we consider some text together. First comment that we read earlier, getting to the question, I have a question for you. If Jesus was with Jehovah before the creation of heavens and the earth, where was Jesus Christ dwelling? Also, if Jehovah is above Jesus, Jehovah would have to occupy space and time. If Jehovah is eternal, then he cannot be above anything, because God does not occupy space or time. No biblical texts, just statements of fact being attributed to God and Jesus in the Bible as if they're correct. And we know, as I just showed, I followed up and asked love for Jesus, where in the Bible does it say God does not occupy space and time? No response to that question. No texts. No defense. I guess he or she is too busy praying for me all the time to give me actual citations. Maybe you could take a break for just a few minutes, love for Jesus, and actually defend your position as biblical next. Because that's what I'm going to do. Ready? Here we go. Let's take a look at these texts together. Psalm 90, verse 4. 1,000 years are in your eyes, but as yesterday, when it is past, and as a watch during the night. Now, this is very similar to the very next text, which most of us are familiar with, 2 Peter 3:8. However, let this one fact not be escaping your notice, beloved ones, that one day is with para, Jehovah. Divine name doesn't occur here in the Greek text. It's not part of a quotation, so I don't agree with the NWT's use of it here. But I've already explained why. So Watchtower Society members, you should be aware you don't really have good justification for the divine name here. But I've already talked about that, and so we're going to move on. However, I want to note it here so people aren't confused about its presence. I do believe the references to Jehovah. I just don't believe the divine name should be used where it's not quoted from the Old Testament where the divine name occurs. Not unless you have manuscript authority otherwise for it. But we're going to read it anyway. One day with Jehovah or the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. That's time. It doesn't say one day with Jehovah or with God or the Lord is eternal. It says that one day to him is a longer period of time, 1,000 years, just like in Psalm 94. This is how the Hebrew text in the Old Testament and the Greek text in the New Testament present time as it relates to Jehovah or God. It doesn't say he doesn't relate to time or that it's always eternal in his time. It presents a different scale of time that he relates to, even though he's eternal. So we just can't comprehend that because we're not eternal ourselves. We relate to time as we understand and experience it in our temporal world. God is the existing one, as I quoted from Revelation 1:4. He just exists. That's how the Bible presents him. And in his existence, he relates to time. Time is not a thing that you can be inside of. It is a measurement between actions, events, thoughts, anything that occurs in relation to something else. That's how we use it ourselves. When we say, what time is it? We're talking about the sequence, the measurement that we use that charts events, movements, positions, all of the things that we observe and that take place relative to each other, just like with God. Although he's eternal, so everything that relates to something that occurs with him is on a different scale, presented here as one day being 1,000 years. That's what the Bible teaches. And with that scale of time, God is eternal as the existing one. Now, Love for Jesus wanted to know where Jesus lived, right? Let's go back to that just a moment so that we can determine briefly, or get the context, I should say, clear in our minds. Where was Jesus dwelling? If Jesus was with Jehovah before the creation of the heavens and the earth, where was Jesus dwelling? You see how far these people will go? They'll actually try to get in to the metaphysical existence of God and the pre-human Jesus without any biblical text and question whether or not Jesus was homeless. Right? They can't even, in going into the metaphysical speculation in which they're using, come up with an explanation from the Bible about where Jesus was dwelling. And they use this as a basis for trying to prove, I guess, since we're talking about the video in which I discussed things related to concepts involving eternality, generation, the relationship between the Son and the Father, so that it's not Trinitarian in the Bible, stating if Jehovah's eternally can't be above anything, doesn't occupy space or time, where was Jesus dwelling if he was with Jehovah before the creation of the heavens and the earth? Let's take a look at what the Bible tells us about that. Luke 16:9. Also, I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the unrighteous riches, so that when such fail, they may receive you, love for Jesus, into the everlasting dwelling places. Have you ever read Luke 16, love for Jesus? Because it seems like if you had, you would already know there are places you would consider eternal, although we'll get to that further in a moment, because the text states, tas aionius skenas. Most of you Trinitarians try to argue that that means eternal, either going backwards or going forwards, which is not true. But it is true to you, at least many of you. So why couldn't you come up with this explanation, love for Jesus? No one in your prayer group or church or religion knows about Luke 16:9? Not even the spiritually retarded lame after whom you're asking this question on my time? So, if Jesus teaches there are eternal dwelling places, or at least places that are existing long before the creation of the heavens and the earth, why are you asking this question? The Bible answers it for you. Hebrews 3:4. This is a text I cited in my answer to Love for Jesus to explain that God actually builds houses. Like in John 14:2, in the house of my Father there are many abodes. I'm going away, prepare a place for you. I'm going to return again. Where I am, you also will be. So, if Jesus in John 14:2 teaches the Father has a house, and Luke 16:9, Jesus teaches these are eternal houses, again, why are you asking me this question? It's explicitly answered in the biblical text. And as far as whether or not these houses are eternal, just like I wrote to love for Jesus, Hebrews 3:4 makes it explicit that everlasting, aionios, is not eternal, always going backwards. They're not eternal houses. God is the existing one, Revelation 1:4. He creates the firstborn one, Proverbs 8:22 through 25, Deuteronomy 21:17, Hebrews 1:6, Colossians 1:15, Revelation 3:14, John 5:26. We have many texts to show this. Creates the firstborn, begets the firstborn, same thing. And then, since houses aren't God's firstborn, he creates houses in heaven where he exists, where he occupies a place that's called his house according to Jesus in John 14:2. He made every house. Every house is constructed by someone. He that constructed all things, including houses in heaven, love for Jesus, is God. So anyone who would ask the question, where was God living before he made Jesus, or before he made heaven? Or where was Jesus living when he was with God before they made the heavens and the earth? Is either ignorant of widely available and well-known non-controversial texts, or blaspheming, just so they can try to make an argument that doesn't make any sense. Hence, there was not one single biblical text cited in the question love for Jesus asked me. Totally different than how I and those who are like me deal with these texts, right? I mean, that's what we do. We're only interested in the text view. That's why when someone asks me, where was God living before he created Jesus or any heavenly house? He's existing. Revelation 1:4. He exists. We don't need to know anything more. You do. You have to try to come up with some metaphysical question or speculation to try to sustain your non-biblical view. We don't. We just read the text and we accept it. God is eternal. He's the Father. No one created him. He's the existing one. He created Jesus as the firstborn, the beginning of his children, the beginning of his creation. And through Jesus, he made every house in heaven. For him, my Father's house, and for his sons, many abodes. John 14:2. Another well-known, non-controversial text. And these houses that God made after he created Jesus, in which God dwells, occupying space, in total defiance of your view, these houses that Jesus said his Father has and made are called eternal or everlasting, even though we know they're not, because He that constructed all things in the context of every house being constructed is God. So every house is constructed. Eternal aionios does not mean eternal as if they've always been there like God, the existing one, or as if they had to be made before the firstborn one. Because first you have to exist and make your firstborn son in order for there to be a place or a person like your son to live in with you in the house you create through and in him. Colossians 1:15 through 17. I'm going to do a whole show about it in my Bible and the Trinity and Conflict series in the future. But the meaning is plain. God doesn't need a house to exist. He exists. He creates houses for him and for Jesus and all the sons of God who shouted in applause according to Job 38:7 when he made the heavens and the earth. Before that time, as Proverbs 8 makes plain, he begat and created, same thing, wisdom, who in the New Testament is Jesus, the firstborn of God, the beginning of the creation by God. All temporal terms used in a non-figurative context, and so we accept the text. We don't have to present arguments based on what's next and that don't have any texts and that absolutely explicitly defy the meaning of these texts. So I wanted to go over these comments with you all to show you the kinds of things that people are presenting to me and that I know they're presenting to you. Because before Love for Jesus brought this to my channel, I heard it from other people too. From an individual who is known for coming up with some of the stupidest arguments possible to try and sustain a dying doctrine by any means possible because they don't have anything left. All they're left with are arguments that defy the text, blaspheme God and his Son, and his house in heaven, and make statements about him not occupying time or space without even defining time or space in the first place so that it might support their question. We go to the Bible. I highly encourage all of you, and especially you, Love for Jesus, to do that too. Then I guarantee you won't look dumb, you won't look stupid, and in fact, you'll be right in line with the wisdom that comes to our mind when we read and accept the teachings of God.